Congresswoman Karen Bass. She serves on the House Judiciary Committee, which we'll hear from the Attorney General tomorrow. Also with me is Michelle Cotto from the Daily Beast. Thank you both for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Congresswoman, let me go to you first.
Sure.
There are real concerns about what happened to the Associated Press. Right. Genuine concerns. But do you think the Republicans are operating in good faith here?
Absolutely not. I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. I think this is a very consistent drumbeat, a drumbeat that they've been beating on since I've been here, and I'm going into my third year. They've had a long list of complaints about Attorney General Holder and, frankly, everybody else in the president's cabinet. So before we even take step one of an investigation into what's happened, they're calling for his resignation. At some point in time, we need to get to the business of this country, and the number one thing we need to be focused on is the economy and jobs.
Now, Michelle, when you look at the fact that the president and the Attorney General is under attack, as I just read, but Attorney General Holder has said he recused himself before the records at AP were taken. No one that I know would defend the intimidation of the press, and certainly those of us that have felt that IRS and law enforcement and others have gone over the line for political reasons would not in any way justify this. But if he recused himself and was not involved, one has to look at the fact that the House has had a mission against this Attorney General for a while. In fact, he's the first Attorney General in history to be held in contempt of Congress. When you look at the fact that the House Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, who called for his resignation today, is also hypocritical in the sense that he said today that the actions by the Justice Department are, quote, obviously disturbing. But back in 2007, he was one of just 21 House members to vote against a bill that would have protected the Associated Press in this case. So while I think we need to get to the bottom of this, we better be careful about whose shovel we're letting dig to the bottom here.
I mean, it is true, I think. The Attorney General in particular has been a good target for Republicans over the years. I think Reince Priebus himself wanted Eric Holder to resign over Fast and Furious. Before, years ago we had him under fire. Everybody thought he was going to be let go because of where you try terrorism suspects. And this is not the first time. I mean, every few months we find a new reason that the Attorney General should be fired, according to the Republicans. But it's perfect with their kind of agenda right now because they don't want to talk about things like immigration and the economy, and they've got the midterms coming up, right. And scandal season makes for really good politics for them.
Now, Congresswoman, again, I think that, and it was Reince Priebus, the chair of the Republican Party, that called for the Attorney General's resignation, but it was Issa who led the fight to hold him in contempt. And again, we are not at all saying this is not egregious and must be looked at in terms of AP, because whether it's government overreach and intimidation on the left or the right is wrong and must be condemned. But we must also make sure that those that look into this are doing this in a balanced and fair way and not just playing some cheap political points at the expense of the freedom of the press.
Well, absolutely, and I do have to say, and I'm sad to say, that I have a hard way believing that they would actually look at it in an objective manner. If you begin before the investigation even starts by calling for the resignation, and you remember last year it was so disrespectful to Attorney General Holder that a number of us walked off the floor and refused to participate in the vote to hold him in contempt. And as you mentioned, the first time in U.S. history for this to happen. But if it's not the Attorney General, it's the EPA, it's Homeland Security. I mean, you just go down the list. And just as your other guest said, it's really every few months that there is a call for his resignation. So I really think that this is shameful. We need to get back to the business of the country, and this kind of situation really needs to stop.
And I think that we need to say, let us have a thorough and full investigation and let the matter fall, let the sword fall where it may. But Michelle, let us not forget that the Bush administration is dealing with reporters also came into question. NPR reports 3 years ago, the Justice Department Inspector General found evidence that the FBI was getting phone records from the Washington Post and the New York Times in the Bush administration without following guidelines regarding reporters. I don't remember the Republicans or the right wing screaming when that came out. There seemed to have been a collective case of Republican laryngitis.
Yeah, it all depends on whose team you're batting for and kind of who's in power at the time. This is not an unusual practice. I think what's upset the AP in particular is the scope of what has been done here, you know, the number of reporters and the amount of time. But that said, the Republicans were, you know, very quick to step up and start making Nixon, you know, the kind of Nixon comparisons that we all get to hear every time somebody does something slightly, you know, questionable here. And it's just the scandal season. They're going to add this to the long list of other things that, you know, may or may not actually make people think along the lines of a government that the Republicans want you to think is way out of control and overreaching and way too big brotherish.
Congresswoman Karen Bass and Michelle Cottle, thank you for your time this evening. And let me say, before we move on to the chair of the RNC, Reince Priebus, it would seem to me very strange that the one person that has said they were recused from the situation before what all of us feel is wrong is the one you want to resign. Even in the middle of something that could accrue to your benefit, you never fail to mess it up by overreaching. Let it go, Reince. Let it go where it's got to go. The more you push it,